మీరు స్టార్ట్ చేయండి సార్.
ప్రార్థన స్టార్ట్ చేయండి. ఝాన్సీతో ప్రార్థన.
హరి ఓం నమో భగవతే శ్రీ జ్ఞానానంద సద్గురు పరబ్రహ్మణే నమః. అందరికీ హృదయపూర్వక నమస్కారాలు. తుషారధారా పిహితాంతరాసు హిమాద్రి గంభీరధరీషు నిత్యం దిగంబరో బ్రహ్మణి సక్తచేతాః యమీయస్తే శిరధి సమాధౌ శ్రీమత్పరమహంసాయ శ్రీ జ్ఞానానందయోగినే పరివ్రాజకవర్యాయ ఆచార్యాయ నమోస్తుతే. హరి ఓం. అజ్ఞానం అవిద్యా యత్కృపతో వినశ్యతః తం దేవం స్వగురం నిత్యం శ్రీ జ్ఞానానందం నమామ్యహం. దిక్కాలాచ్చ నవచ్చిన్నం నిష్కళం యన్నిరంతరం నిర్వికల్పం పరాత్మానం నిర్వికారం చ నిర్గుణం అనంతం సచ్చిదానందం అవాంగ్మానసగోచరం అద్వయం స్వప్రకాశం చ బ్రహ్మతత్వముపాస్మహే. హరి ఓం. నమో భగవతే శ్రీ జ్ఞానానంద సద్గురు పరబ్రహ్మణే నమః.
హరి ఓం. ఓం తత్సత్. Welcome back to our Satsangas. Today's topic again is philosophy of yoga, the lecture given by Swami Jnanananda at Agra University in the year 1938. The lecture is philosophy of yoga. This is actually second talk in English on the topic. I would like to review what we talked the last session, because I know I did not make myself completely clear on this deep subject. So forgive me for repetition, but I feel it is important to duplicate the at least parts of the previous talk. As in the preliminary remarks, as Swamiji said, he was going to concentrate on the topic of epistemology and ethics and psychology of philosophy of the subject. So what is epistemology? You can scroll back to the next slide, please. What is epistemology? Epistemology is the science of the knowledge. By the way, philosophy itself means wisdom of the knowledge. So philosophy has very little to do with the religion itself. Philosophy is the wisdom of the knowledge. So it is the epistemology is the Mr. Bhanu, please scroll back up. Is the epistemology is the amount, is the knowledge itself. You can scroll more again, a little bit more. Again, the topic itself is how the epistemology pertains to yoga itself. It helps us to understand the philosophy of yoga so that if the practical applications are better understood, once we understand it better, we can grasp it better and practice it better. So before going forward, let me recall what is the definition of yoga. Yoga, by definition, is restraint of subjective modifications, or in Sanskritam, chitta vritti nirodham. The restraints of subjective modifications, as Swamiji calls it in English. However, he expands the definition of yoga in this talk. So by the end of this talk, we'll be able to understand the full definition of yoga. By that I mean transcending both sense ego as well as the superego, as well as the super subject. So in order to understand that, so these preliminary comments are there. So the study of epistemology principles and so far they have direct bearing on you will be of immense value, both for a clear and thorough grasp of philosophy yoga for a systemic practical study. Go ahead, please. Yeah. What is epistemology? It is a theory, a method, and grounds of knowledge. So how is knowledge is possible? What is the limits of knowledge in understanding this world? What is our understanding is in its agreement with existence? And how is it not in agreement of what we understand about the subject? So there are some examples Swami gives in this context. So whatever we are perceiving an object, the object is we are perceiving through our senses. Our senses meaning our eyes, ears, tongue, and skin. In Sanskritam, these are called Jnanendriyas. So through jnana, through our senses, we are perceiving an object. It is not the object that is giving this perceiving the way it is. These are our senses that we are able to perceive it. So for example, if you just close our eyes, that object disappears. So it's entirely our senses that are perceiving the object. Again now, as he explained very well, that when we see a table, the table looks nice and smooth, but in reality, when we observe the microscope, it is not smooth anymore. It has nice ups and downs, furrows. You can go up, and then it is uneven. And not only that, and when you do with the microscope, you can even see all those furrows. We also understand, furthermore, that this table is not continuous, it's discontinuous. We think it's all nice and smooth. It's from one end to another end, it is all one. But actually we do know from the scientists and physicists that it is not smooth. It contains many atoms, protons, electrons, and all that. And there is actually a space between those two electrons. And these electrons move around the center called nucleus, and the electrons move at a tremendous speed within around themselves. They are not inert or static anymore. So what we're seeing through our senses, this nice smooth table, is not smooth anymore. It is made up of a lot of furrows. It is made of electrons and protons, and there is central nucleus, and there are electrons, protons rotating like as if these are made like in the universe, like our sun being in the center, and all our planets are moving around the sun. So what we're seeing by senses is not entirely what is true. So again, another example is looking at starry starry sky at night time, we're seeing those stars as small specks with our naked eye. However, we know for a fact that when we look at with the telescope and we understand the reality of it, they are not small anymore. They are not just a geometrical points, and they are mightier than the sun. For example, the sun is so big that it can put in, actually, if you put all million Earths into the sun, it is that big. And these stars are a lot bigger than those. Those stars are a lot bigger than these suns. Some of them even hundreds of thousands of sizes bigger than the sun. So those are really huge. Not only that, and the light, the twinkle, twinkle little stars that they are in the starry sky, the light they are emitting from those stars, it takes some of them even millions of years to get to our Earth. Meaning the one, this is the light, the speed of the light is nearly 120,000, 120,000, 20 or 25,000 miles per second. So it takes years, sometimes even millions of years for that twinkle, twinkle little star, that light that is emitted to reach us. So it is that far away, those stars are there. And for us, for our naked eye, for our senses, they look small. However, so for the sense object, by our sense, in our sense world, those are little things. But in reality, they are not real anymore. The same example, a person who is of same size when he is near me, as he goes away from me, and they get smaller and smaller, eventually disappear. So when he disappears, I know through my another sense called sense ego, he did not disappear. He is the same as me, but it is my super sense world. By that super sense world, I am knowing that he is not disappearing, he is not small, but he is really of same size as me. It's the same perception through our superego that we are able to understand the sciences that we know is a fact. So there are two things here. One is sense ego, another is super ego. So let's try to understand what these two are. Okay, let me slide back. I'm going to go back a little bit. Understanding the word ego. Ego is generally we understand it is as hankara, or in Telugu, garvam, or whatever in English, proper word in English is, or vanity in English word. However, in philosophical and spiritual world, and these are faculties of our mind, those are manas, buddhi, ahankara, chitta. So that ahankara is ego. That ego actually means in spirituality that it is the faculty of our mind, of our brain, our faculty is to be distinguished between mine or thine, whether it belongs to me or not. However, here in this philosophy, Swami explains that this portion of our ego actually differentiates between sense ego and super ego. Again, to expand what we are discussing. The sense ego, by sense ego, we go to what is called sense world. Meaning, by the senses, if I'm seeing something and I'm perceiving it, that is sense world. As far as superego is concerned, the superego is that portion of that, what Swami uses word offspring of that ego, and we are able to understand or perceive the true nature of this so-called real world of the scientist, that has scientists has taught us. That real world with a small r is the world that is we are able to understand and perceive by our superego portion of the ego. So we have a sense world and we have a superego ego. However, that superego, that scientific knowledge that we have, is again perceived through our sense world only. So in our sense world, in our senses, we're able to perceive and understand both sense ego and superego. So there are two worlds here: sense world, sense ego, superego, sense world, and super world. So, Mr. Vani, if you can go up a little bit. I know I am not going word by word because we already went through all that stuff. They are all available for you to go through at your convenience. So let us go forward. You can scroll more slowly. Okay. So it is that evident the truth is different from appearance. So keep going. However, this word is important. The scientist, therefore, does not trouble himself with these attempts. So what is scientist is unable to explain to us, that he is explaining to us that these stars are there and they are huge and they are emitting light that is taking millions of years to us. But how come? How is that I'm not able to see in my senses? I'm able to grasp it through my sense world, through my sense ego. How is that I'm not able to perceive it in my sense world? He's not able to give that to us, but he's not bothered with it. He is happy with that. He is able to tell us what he is able to find with his knowledge and with his instruments. And he is able to explain to us with the complicated mathematical equations. This is all the synthetical mathematics. That is, he is able to explain all this energy. I know I gave the simple example of Einstein theory of mathematics and physics, E equal mc square. That is how we're able to understand the physical nature of the universe. That is all explained to us by mathematics and synthetic equations, which are grasped by our superego as well as the real world that is grasped by superego. So it is the sense ego, superego, and by sense world and the real world as explained by the scientist. So what are these correlative words? So from these epistemology, again, the epistemology is a science of philosophy. So by a philosopher need to understand what is presented to him and make a reasonable thought process. That's what philosopher is. So from the philosopher point of view, that sense world is an appearance, and that does not constitute the real world. It is the sense world is different from the so-called real world, which is the objective series of unit events that are correlative is the subjective series of the superego. Let me expand this sentence a little bit more. What is the so-called real world is comprising of the objective series of unit events. So for for perceiving an object, you need a subject and object. So our senses, meaning here is the subject, is perceiving an object through a process called subjective series. Again, the subjective series is objectified as a series of objective series. It is objectified as an objective series. Now, how is the sense world is objectified into the real world, into the so-called real world? So everything, when we say the so-called real world is the world we know through our superego, which we'll know through our present state of knowledge. So these systems of modifications of the subjective series of sense ego are not recognized as the modifications, but are externalized as the objective, as they are objectified and perceived as the sense world. So we're still making this an objective world. So everything is objectification, meaning when we perceive an object, and our sense world is objectifying it. In other words, if I'm looking at a water bottle right now in front of me, and my sense world, my sensor is objectifying it. So it is not the object that is making it me perceive as a water bottle. It is my senses, and my sense world is objectifying it. So that is, again, it is the same principle. When the superego is objectifying it, it's as a sense. I can just give me an example, not as what Swamiji has talked about. Now I know that water bottles consist of plastic, and it consists of all kinds of chemicals, all kinds of things. So it is not just a simple bottle. And the water, I know it is H2O. So now, although I do not see that water as not as an H2O, now I know through my superego it is a lot more than a simple water bottle that I'm looking at. So it is all a objectification of an object through my sense ego, sense world, then superego, and this we can also call super world, so super sense world, objectification of super world. Now, how does all this come for a philosopher? The philosopher goes above and beyond this sense ego and superego. The scientist is satisfied with his brilliant scientific discoveries and with his knowledge, and he thinks that is the real world. So the scientist thinks this universe, he knows all about this universe. The scientist tells us this universe came around billions of years ago, and it with a big bang, and all the stars formed and all that stuff. So he is satisfied with the knowledge of the universe. However, the philosopher wants to go above and beyond of what is beyond this sense ego and superego. Again, one word about this. I like this sentence, what Swami says. When there is a purely functional subjective series of superego, then there is a glimpse of picture, so-called real world. The sense world loses its significance. Let me explain, let me say what this means. In other words, when I understand that, when I know that star is just such a huge thing, and that star, for example, the sun, whom I see in the morning, giving us me the beautiful sunshine, not only beautiful sunshine, the essential life. And when I looked at it, it is such a hot thing. It just looks not too far from me. I know it is from my superego, from my knowledge. It is at a far off distance. And I do know now it consists of hydrogen and helium. So now, when I look at it, I look at sun in a different perspective. That is what Swami is saying here. He says, when I understand that, my sense world loses its significance. In other words, I understand it, I look at it, star or sun, in a different perspective. I look at it, it's not small. It has huge amount of energy. And through energy, we're all surviving. And that energy is responsible for this earth to survive. And now it is, I am alive because of that. And so my sense world, just by not looking at a real glow, at a beautiful object that is going, rising and going around, but I have a different perspective of it. That's what the sense world loses its significance. Then I don't look at it just as a round globe, round red globe. So now, what does the philosopher come here? Now, the philosopher thinks about that the real world is above and beyond. It is not limited. Either the real existence is limited neither by modification, series of sense ego or superego. The real existence, being illimitable and unconditioned, is infinite and absolute. Okay, now let us see let's understand the philosophy of it. So here, the difference between the real world, the two real worlds. One, the real world with a small r, that we know as we understand through our senses, to our sense ego and the superego. Now, what is the real world with a capital R, or reality, or Atman or Brahman? What is it? And the real existence being illimitable, unconditioned, infinite, and absolute, and it is infinitely supreme. Now, then in the next sentence, Swami says, unlike a layman, the philosopher does not rest satisfied with the sense world, and unlike a scientist, he is not contented with marvelous picture of the objective series of the unit events. Let us take a little bit more about the understanding of the objective series of the unit events, because it is necessary to understand it to go to the next part of the yoga, especially the karma yoga. That will be our next subject. The unit events, as we understand through science, that the nice table that we are looking at is comprised of series of electrons, protons, and these are going through extreme speeds, and they have extreme energy, and they are consisting of literally millions and trillions of units. And they are all undergoing through, and there is also a gap between electrons, that is space lattice. And that they all go through a time-space understanding, time-space web. So this is an extremely complicated picture going through unbelievable amount of action through series of unit events, which we are not able to perceive through our sense world or even with super ego world. In other words, we are not able to see through either our senses or sense world, our super ego world. We are not able to perceive what is going on in this so-called inert table. We are unable to perceive that either through our inner sense world, superego, sense ego. So, however, it is able to grasp it through, for example, in this case, me, I am looking at as a table consisting of a series, going through a series of unit events, units of electrons or protons, and this subject, Swami calls is that portion of the subject calls is as a super subject. It will come as we go around. So the process that one has to go through to realize with a capital R, that is the realization that we talk about. That realization means grasping, understanding is what is real. That is what is realization. And that realization is, as Swami described earlier, it is illimitable. It is undestroyable. It is infinite. It is absolute. But we cannot grasp it through our senses or through our super ego. In other words, we cannot grasp it through our senses. We cannot grasp it through our sense world. So, so there is at that time, once we are going through, he does not remain there but wishes. He wanted to go so say this is a beautiful sentence. I want to read it again. He, however, does not remain there but wishes to soar high into the region beyond the modification of series of sense ego as well as the transformation of the super ego. Therein, the series of sense ego and that of super ego find their solace and cease in that solace. So they all just hush. They take rest in that solace. There, when it happens, when the sense ego and the super ego get their solace and just cease in their solace, then there is no longer here, and there is no longer where, and there is absolute divine in an unfalsified existence. So that is what is called realization. When you find that there is no longer here and there is no longer where, and then there is absolute divine in an unfalsified existence. The realization of the absolute divine in unfalsified existence is the outcome of the transcendence. So this is what this is all about. So how do you do that? This is a process called transcendence. So all this is all about transcendence. So you see all this thing is unfalsified. This is transcendence. Give me a second, please, for my water. So how do you do that? Again, going back to our yoga. In the beginning, we defined yoga as chitta vritti nirodham, or restraint of the subject to modifications. And chitta vritti. Vrittis are these are subject to modifications. These are pramanas, viparyaya, nidra, smriti. I forgot one. There is one more. Forgot anyhow. So these are vrittis, and they are in restricted sense. These yoga, besides restraints of vrittis, is the transcendence or the series of sense ego and superego, hushing the sense object in the objective series of unit events, thus realizing the absolute divine and unfalsified existence. So this is the addition of description of definition of yoga. So in the initial description, we saw Chittavritti Nirodham, but here it is expanding that definition as transcendence over sense ego and the super ego. Now, yoga in broadest sense finally comprises the sublimation, meaning how to explain, hushing, so to speak, of the subjective series of sense ego and that superego and their respective objects with the light of realization of the object of the absolute divine. So this is how by realization of absolute divine. So the next sentence is also important. Yoga, in its broadest sense, the Purna Yoga, therefore consists of restraints of vrittis, the transcendence over sense ego and superego, the realization of absolute divine in unfalsified existence, and finally, sublimation of the subject and supersubject, and the respective objects of the supreme enlightenment. So here, so Swami expands that yoga in pure sense of yoga, in addition to the classical 4 yogas, meaning karma yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, and jnana yoga, Swami brings on the concept of Purna yoga, meaning after realizing the absolute through one of these yoga, which is the transcendence or hushing of our vrittis, which are obtained through our brain, through our mind, through our faculties, and these are hushed up by, I'm meaning, sense ego, superego, and their correlative worlds, meaning sense world and the so-called real world, by hushing them or restraining them. We're going through process of yoga, through various process of yogas, then going to samadhi state, then realizing the absolute, the names being Atman, Brahman, and absolute enlightenment. So the sublimation. So what is this Purna Yoga? Okay, let's go and understand what Swami is talking about Purna Yoga. So this Purna Yoga, let us start by taking the example of Adi Sankaracharya. So allow me to do it in reverse way so that it is easier to understand. Adi Sankaracharya, after realizing the absolute, was walking through the streets of the Benares, and then he saw an untouchable, and he asked the untouchable to get him out of the way. So then what is happening at that state in mind? So although it is possible to realize the absolute through one of these yogas, since even then there are some samskaras that he has still retained through whatever reason, whether you may call it through his previous life or simply he has not attained perfection. So what perfection here is, the understanding here is, or the misunderstanding here is, that Adi Shankaracharya at that point in time did not realize that the person that is outside of his body himself is Brahman. That he is at that point in time, he is thinking about me and thy, mine or thine, so to speak. So he has not realized the non-duality of this universe. So in other words, at that point in time, he is looking at the so-called untouchable at that point in time, that he is different than himself. Then Lord Shankara himself came and destroyed his ignorance. So the point here is the entire universe, including the entire universe, all this, the globe, the universe, the energy, the nature, the entire humans, the everything, the whole nature, the prakriti, the entire thing is Brahman, including you. The whole thing is Brahman. So he has cleared the misconception of the Shankaracharya about non-duality, and then he became the one and this thing. The moral for us, the commoners, for us to understand that this whole universe is one, is the same. So we have to understand that every human being, every nature is part of the nature and is part of us. So this eliminates all our bad thoughts. It gives us energy to appreciate the nature, to appreciate the social aspect, and then it destroys all the walls among us, among the whole universe. That is what is Purna Yoga means. So having said that, let us understand what Swamiji is saying through his words. So what is the philosophers are aspiring for, going above and beyond. So let's go forward. Next paragraph, please. So there are two ways of attaining this Purna Yoga. There are there are two ways. One is spontaneous. Swami says in this universe, there are spontaneous Purna Yogis, always happens in every country and at every time. It is not Swami that said that, but it is only me saying that. Take it is for whatever is worth. Maybe that's what Bhagavad Gita telling us as Avatara Purushos. Maybe there are some spontaneous Purna Yogis always happen in this world. So they come to this world and they attain this Purna Yogis spontaneously. How does it happen to them, not to others? It happens to them because of this intense desire to hush up the sense ego and superego, and they are able to overwhelm all their vrittis, all their nervous system, all their mind, all their that mano, buddhi, chitta, hankaras, all their vrittis. They can overwhelm their nervous system, and they able to attain that without difficulty. They're spontaneously. I think they are born like that. That's how they are, or they are blessed. Maybe that's what they call blessed souls, or whatever it is. Those are my words. Those are not Swami words. So these other words, most of them come by not spontaneously, by gradual means. It happens through various yogas. So next paragraph, next page, please. So these are 4 yogas. These 4 yogas, what are the yogas? Those are 4 we already know. How are they called by different names? These are called by different names. The philosophers classified us, the humans, into 4 categories. These are active, some by nature are active personalities. They're continually active. Some are emotional, meaning they have emotional personalities. Some are mystics, and some are vivekis, or by temperament. So these are 4 different, those are vivekis or rational temperaments. So these are 4 different temperaments by nature. So each individual can advance by different yogas through different ways. So one can take up what suits them the best, and each one is good. Each one suits each individual. So each individual taking up that yoga, and through their practice of restraints, through subjective restraints, through various processes that are described in, for example, we went through in a detailed description of 4 yogas through Purna Sutras, in a very detail. So those are the things that we go through the process of restraints. Again, as Swami described in this lecture, in addition to concept, we have added the concept of sense ego and the super ego. So keeping by this thing, by inaction in the perform of action, that is karma yoga, by love and devotion, that's the bhakti yoga, by direct psychic control, that is raja yoga, and philosophical discrimination, that is jnana yoga. The restraints of transformation caused by attitude, which is cultivated, maintained by inaction in the perform of action, is karma yoga. So that is the inaction in the performance of action is karma yoga. So that sentence is important. That is a karma in karma. That is described in our Bhagavad Gita as that. That is karma in karma. That is what karma yogi goes by, this thing. So let me digress for a minute and give the point of importance of karma yogi, karma in karma yogi, and the transformation of the super yoga. And as we go by, Swami inserts a word called, that comes later as we go through, a word by action, action in karma. What that is equal to, that unit events. So the whole universe is going through tremendous action. It is not still, it is not still. It appears still, but it's not. It is going through immense, unbelievable amount of action. Everything is transforming. Everything is changing. The amount of change that goes through in the universe is unbelievable. The whole universe is being born and destroyed and traveling at immense speed. So everything is action. So this even when we talk, when we move, and not only what we are not perceiving is going through action. So through a karma yogi, action is so important. He can understand, he can relate to it. So, however, he is seeing this action not by what his action is. He believes all this action is Vishwa karma or Daiva karma. So he is a part of that action. So he is not different than Daivam. So whatever he is doing not for himself. He is not doing it. He is a part of Daiva karma or Vishwa karma. So it is divine that is part of this karma. So that is important to understand this this part of the action as applied to, as before Swami said, the unit events. So he is addressing that as when we are looking at the table, that nothing is happening there, but a lot is happening there, which appears to me as inert, but it's not. The whole universe is not inert, constantly changing. It is changeable. That is the definition of Maya. It is changeable. Everything is changing. The universe is changing. Our earth is changing. Our atmosphere is changing. That so that the entire change that is happening through our whatever is what we are constantly calling the changing, it is changing. It has to change. That's how we became. Our human life is possible because of change. Without change, this human life is not possible. It's all action. So this action the karma yogi is part of this action. So he does not see whatever he is doing is not himself. It is himself. He is a daivam. So once he looks at that it is a part of this karma, is part of daiva karma, then that translates into, it does not look as an action. It translates into a daiva karma that itself transforms into that action itself into dhyana. So what we see as an action is not a simply action. It is transforms into directly into dhyanam, into samadhi, and into realization of the absolute. So that is what karma yoga is in nutshell. Of Swami is selling is lecturing here, but as we go along, we will understand that a little bit more. So next again, he has spent quite a bit of time here on Purna Yoga. Again, as we briefly talked about why Purna Yoga is so important for a yogi. Unless a yogi transforms himself to a higher state, that realization is incomplete. Swami says very clearly in Purna Sutras. And at the end of the Jnana Yoga, also he describes that very clearly. So the sixth chapter in this thing, the Purna Yoga, he clearly explains so. So here, if you go this sentence, this, however, is not the final. It is not the final which the philosophers aspire for, and they have intrinsic desire to go beyond. After realizing the absolute divine, which is the final end of any of the four yogas, it is essential to let the subjective series of sense ego and the super ego on the one hand and the respective object on the other. It is inherently, incessantly permeated, unhindered, unchecked, unassailed by tendencies, by the good and the bad, virtuous and vicious. Please go forward. Next sentence, next paragraph. Virtuous and vicious, with the enlightenment due to realization of divine reality and achievement Purna Yoga after the realization of absolute. It is with the process Purna Yoga is achieved. It is the subjective of, and all that. I just go forward. What happens when you do all this stuff? Then there is no segregation. There is no dual throng. There is no duality. The divine. There is no dual throng, the divine and all undivine. It is no more. It is no more the divine and all. And it is only the absolute divine. That is all, and is all with a capital All. So in Advaitam philosophy, there is only one. It is all with a capital A. So here with the supreme attitude, after realizing the absolute through 4 yogas, yogi proceeds to obtain the Purna Yogi, and through the process of intent, desire, and yoga, you can go forward because we already went through this in simple English, so we can skip and go forward. You can go forward. You can go forward. So there are 4 temperaments. We went through all this again. 4 yogas, dawn of inner understanding. We can go forward. We can do this too. Common constituent. Okay, let's go through this a little bit. So what are the common constituents of the 4 yogas? So how do you do that? There, we said there are 4 yogas. The constituents are, this is important. There is one important sentence called harmonization, discipline, and the strength. So harmonization is coupling, and what is this? Let's say you and me work together, combine, harmonize, in harmony, working together in harmony. Discipline. And through discipline, we obtain strength. And with what it has to be combined with moral conduct and by study and experience. All these are essential for a yogi. What are essential? Discipline and moral conduct, study and experience. Of course, he didn't say that at this sentence, but in addition to that, most importantly, the guru. Anyhow, so this is at this point in time. So these are the absolute essentials for a yogi, that to have moral conduct. And these moral conducts very in a very detailed way. It is described in different yoga paths, and they're all applicable to all yogis, whatever he chooses. But in certain yogas, Swami described in Raja Yoga 2 sets of 10 moral virtues, and again in Raja Yoga 8 limbs as described by Patanjali. So again in Jnana Yoga, he applied few more in a different way. So, but in whatever process one takes up, moral virtues or moral conduct is essential, without which, it is not possible to go forward. So the foundation is mutual understanding of individuals, social welfare, national integrity, harmony and perfection is the source of external peace, internal strength and serenity. And by earnest practice, moral conduct is excellent. Discipline and emotion, harmonization of subjective series and truthfulness. Again, at this point in time, and he brings the example of how important these moral conduct are. Like we go through our satsangas, every satsanga we go through this moral conduct and how important these are. Even to before even start dhyanam, these are important for a yogi. So again, every yogi chooses his own temperament, and he goes through forward. Let's go forward. Again, when I start to talk, I I begin with the intent of starting at 20 minutes or half an hour. I never succeed. Sorry, I think more than an hour, but I'm sorry I can't do it any better. It is a deep subject, very difficult for me. It is my ignorance, my inability to do it. So, however, we'll do our best. Having read this 2 times, so next time on the next session, I will not repeat it. I'll go through those 4 yogas, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga and Jnana Yogas, and go forward. So we'll stop at this point. And since we started it, let's go and practice dhyanam for 20 minutes and conclude this session. Again, I thank you for joining us, and I thank you. I thank Swami Jnanananda Trust for giving us this opportunity to continue to give the message of great, not great, Avadhuta and Anusastraveta, or scientist, message to the world. Thank you for joining me. I hope you'll join me again on the next series. We'll try to do it on a regular basis to the best of our ability. Thank you. If you wish, we can conclude this then, and we can go into dhyana.